Hello and welcome to another episode of An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action, a series where leaders look back at decisions they've made and consider a series of questions. I'm Peter Stiepelman, I'm your host, and I'm an imperfect leader. I spent more than 20 years teaching and leading, first in the Oakland Public Schools in Oakland, California, and then in the Midwest, Missouri to be exact, where I was a teacher and principal and assistant superintendent and then the superintendent of the fourth largest district in the state. I'm constantly striving to learn from my experiences and from the experiences of other leaders. The aim of this podcast is to lift the learning and lift the imperfect leaders up. That way, when you hear the term imperfect, you'll see strength. Strength from the candor needed to recognize imperfection as a real advantage. Let's get started. Today on An Imperfect Leader, we've invited Dr. Kim Pietsch-Miller to join us. Dr. Pietsch-Miller is the Superintendent and CEO of Eastland-Fairfield Career and Technical Schools in Columbus, Ohio. She was previously the Superintendent of Bexley City Schools in Columbus, and prior to earning positions as Superintendent, she served as a Chief Academic Officer, an Assistant Superintendent, a Principal, an Assistant Principal, and an English teacher. Dr. Pietsch-Miller also maintains a really terrific blog with fantastic insights and links to resources. I've posted a link in this episode's bio. Kim Pietsch-Miller, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Kim, I am thrilled to meet you. Your article in September's AASA School Administrator magazine, it really caught my eye. First of all, I'm a big Lencioni fan, and I use the Advantage as a blueprint. I certainly have used it as a blueprint when I was a superintendent. I love his distinction between a smart team and a healthy team. And you make interesting distinctions in your article, particularly between planning and preparing. And I wonder, would you tell us just a little bit more about how leaders can approach these two terms?
Absolutely. And I think in the article I wrote about, it was probably close to 10 years ago. I was actually speaking to some students on a career day, and I started telling them about my journey to being an assistant superintendent. And I said, rarely does anyone say I aspire to be an assistant superintendent. It sort of happens. But I started with telling them about when I was 18 and I never wanted to get married. I was never having children, and I would never be a teacher. And then at that point, it was 27 years later, marriage, 2 children, and a career in education. And so I said to the students, you can never really plan, but you can prepare. And that's when that hit me. And then when I heard the podcast, I thought, yeah, this is exactly true. And Lencioni makes the point that the world is changing so rapidly. And I think I also reference a Thomas Friedman book, Thank You for Being Late, that also talks about the exponential rates of change that are going on in our world. And so it seems as soon as you have a plan in place, something will change. And I think the past, couple of years with the pandemic, we've also seen really significant changes that we could not have planned in advance to address the needs, but we had to learn to pivot. And so the planning to me is, I have this really specific way that I'm going to approach work, or a really specific goals, versus preparing, which is, I think, taking on as many experiences as you can, really being you shared some information with me around lead learner, really being that lead learner who's trying to learn as much as you can, and putting your plans into really higher level goals that you want to accomplish, and not getting into the weeds, because it's in the details that you have to constantly be adjusting. So here we have a strategic plan, and it's anchored in 4 big pillars that are also tied to our values. But the actual objectives and the strategies that we'll go after, we really look at those year by year and literally month by month in order to get to those big pictures. So the preparing part, I think, allows you to pivot, and it allows you to respond to current needs, current interests, and current trends.
I imagine in your role also working in the CTE world, things are moving very quickly, and there is a real interest in aligning programming with what industry says they need, what they need now, and what they see that they're going to need in 5-10 years. One of the roles of a superintendent certainly is to be able to look down the road to see what's coming. I imagine when your role is also enhanced with this CTE part, arm of the role, is really paying attention to what is happening in industry as well.
Absolutely. One of the things that that we really monitor are not only what are the in-demand fields right now, but what's the future job outlook? Because the other part of the educational side is this we are not just producing workers or eventual tuition payers at universities. We're really developing young people to also be able to make good decisions and be prepared for the future. So we also look at from our programming standpoint, what's that longer term job outlook, knowing it can change, but we don't want to offer a program that is a relatively short-lived need. So we're always trying to balance what's in demand, but what also has some longevity that we can predict, which may sound contradictory to what I said about planning, but I can say one of the things we teach here is welding. We know that welding will be around for a very long time. As long as we're building and constructing, we are going to need people who have the skill set to be welders. So we are definitely looking at what's in demand. On the high school side, because we have adult programs as well, we also have to look at what are the interests of students. What are high school students interested in studying and learning? And so we're really trying to balance industry demand with student interest at the same time.
You mentioned being able to see essentially the tree and then taking a step back and saying, okay, so what does this whole forest look like? And balancing that perspective. And I think that you have to bounce back and forth as a school leader to be able to attend to the individual needs of people as well as programs, as well as take a step back and say, okay, so what's happening for the entire organization? And in the leadership model I use to anchor myself and others that I advise, there's a domain called nested patterns. And nested patterns speak to how people in the organization agree to behave. It's like high levels of collaboration, shared leadership, empathy, and compassion. Sometimes they refer to values, and you just touched on that. And I wonder if we could return to that question or that concept, because in your article, you mentioned the importance of values. I think in the article, you mentioned relationships, innovation, passion for learning, accountability. And I'm wondering, how do you use values to guide you? And the reason why I ask that is because so often we're sort of told, okay, you're going to be the leader of this organization. You have an obligation to introduce or sustain the values that the organization holds dear. And yet we say them a lot, although we don't use them. And so I'm curious, how do you use values to guide you?
So we have a strategic plan, and we also have mission, vision, and values, and we use all of those. In fact, I will use the word, I insist that the leadership team use those in explaining to staff or to parents or to students why we take the actions that we do. And so through the strategic planning process and through focus groups and surveys, we updated our vision statement, our mission statement, and I'll say we tweaked our values. So we had values of relationships, integrity, passion for learning, and accountability. And through that process, we took out integrity, and I'll talk about why, not because we don't value it, and we added in innovation. And so the reason was, you mentioned I'm superintendent of a career technical school. We have to be able to innovate programming at the speed of business. And one of the criticisms of schools is that we are much slower than industry. And so we have to be at the same speed of industry in order to offer what we are charged with offering to students. And so we took out integrity and put in innovation, but we kept accountability. And really my belief about this is I want everyone to have integrity, but you either do or you don't. But as a leader, as the leader of an organization, I have to hold people accountable to the things that we said we were going to do. And I want people to have integrity, but I can't make somebody have integrity. But I can, or my leaders or one another, we can hold one another accountable to the things that we said we were going to do. And so the way we use those values is if somebody says, would it be okay if I use part of the professional learning day to work on something in my classroom that I need to get done? We might say, Well, no, because we said we had a passion for learning, and this is a day set aside for the adults in the organization to be learners. And so it's important that we're all participating in that. Or why do we need to bring on this new program? Well, because robotics and automation is a growing field, and Intel is building here in Central Ohio. That's in demand. And so we have got to be innovative in our programming because that's what's in demand. So I'm very intentional about using vision, mainly mission, and not that we don't talk about vision, but vision being aspirational, mission being our daily work, values, and then those components of our strategic plan. And we really built our strategic plan around our values as well, so that it's all very integrated. We also engaged all of our stakeholders in developing these. It wasn't Kim Miller didn't develop them, or the administrative team. We really talked to students, staff, parents, associate schools, business partners, alumni to develop it. And so if all of those people gave input that led us to this place, then we need to remind people why we're using them.
I'm curious, the values in particular, was that something that was a product of those focus groups and those conversations, and
yes,
you arrived at these four?
So the district, when I arrived, had a vision, mission statement, and values. And so the vision and mission statements changed pretty significantly. The values just had that one tweak because we felt that those were still, there was no reason to change them for the sake of changing them. Really, they resonated, but we really felt innovation needed to be part of it.
That's great. When I was first a superintendent, I arrived at a district that had 20 values, and I thought, that's too many values. What are you valuing if you have 20 values? And so I worked on the values and brought them to our leadership team, just the core cabinet. We haggled about one word, whether it was collaboration or teamwork. But otherwise, I sort of came forward and said, here are our values. And then when things were sort of spiraling out of control in year 3 for me, I remember turning to someone and saying, but we have these values. Why aren't we leaning on our values? And this person who I trusted and was able to very clearly say to me without any reservations, and I'm grateful for her, said, those are your values. They're not our values. Mm-hmm. And so when I saw that article and I saw your mention of values, that particularly for me, as we help and guide aspiring and new to the superintendency, is how do you arrive at these values together? And clearly you followed a process that engaged your stakeholders. Kim, I asked this question of every guest, and I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind considering it as well. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
So I've been thinking about this and I've decided that leading is a lot like parenting for people who are listening, who are parents. You read the books. You ask questions of those people that you admire and value and trust. You reflect on your own experiences, and then you sometimes cross your fingers and hope you're making the right decision. So I once read an article, and I wish I could remember, it was years ago, but it talked about problems or challenges that relate to human beings, anything living, are the most complex because things don't always go the same way. I would say, I was an English teacher, I said, so I'll, a noun is a noun, or H2O is always water, NaCl is always table salt. But learning and leading, it doesn't always work the same way. If it did, it would be easy. That's the complexity of education, is we are working with human beings. And I always say, when people say, teach the whole child, I'm like, it's a whole person, and so I think leading and working with staff, and especially now where we have staff that are so many different generations, we still have baby boomers and Gen Xers and millennials, and we have similarities, but we're different, and we have different experiences as human beings. And so I think that being it, I don't know that you can be anything but an imperfect leader. And again, I think it's a lot like parenting. You can be successful in parenting, but you still make a lot of mistakes along the way.
An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action, is supported by ILAA, a firm dedicated to supporting aspiring new and established leaders. For more information, please find them at human-centeredleaders.com. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest is Dr. Kim Pietsch-Miller, the Superintendent CEO of Eastland-Fairfield Career and Technical Schools. And in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they had to make, and then we discuss it. So, Kim, what happened?
So I'm going to talk about some general things, but I would say these are things that fall under the HR category. When you have an adult, not a student, but an adult who maybe is in the wrong role, or isn't progressing, isn't aligning their work to the vision, mission, values, strategic plan of the district, and you have to address that. And it's one of the parts of, especially being a superintendent or a chief academic officer, principal, one of the aspects of the position that I least like to do. But I have always said I work for students first and adults second. And so students are counting on us in leadership positions to advocate for them and to be their voice. And so while I've learned to do this, well, if we go back in my career in one of my earlier leadership positions, I had a staff member who was not engaging students in their learning in meaningful ways. And I heard from quite a few students, I heard from quite a few parents, and she was going to be retiring. And so I wasn't as direct and clear with her as I should have been. And it's one of those things I look back on and I regret, because I think I rationalized, well, she's retiring, she's not going to change anyway. What's the point? It will just create difficulty. But as I have learned from that time, I think I owed those students that direct, clear conversation, and the accountability piece. I needed to be accountable to what we were trying to do as a district, and I needed to be accountable to those students, and not handling a crucial conversation the way I should have. I don't know that it hurt them in the long term, but it certainly is something that I decided I would never do that again.
So one of the ways that we reflect on decisions we've made, particularly when it comes to HR related ones, is to take a step back and say, okay, so what was overlooked? And that's different from what could I have done differently? Because one is a systems question, sort of sitting at the balcony and looking down at the dance floor. And so what might have gotten overlooked within the system? Was this a sort of a common practice within the system to sort of wait people out, which, by the way, is a common practice, I think, in systems all across school districts across the nation. And a big part of that is because, unlike other industries, this is an annual contract, and you must, by law, tell people by a certain date your decisions about renewing or non-renewing. And there is a ripple effect based on those decisions that then everybody has to sort of endure and deal with. There's a lot of tension that goes in that. And so I'm curious, just from your own thoughts, what got overlooked?
Because this was a retirement, and because she had notified us earlier in the year that she would be retiring, wasn't so much a non-renewal, although I know exactly, what you're talking about. I have experienced that. I would say only in education do we tell someone we're non-renewing them and then hold on to them for 3 or 4 more months. In any other field, that's it. So it's a little different. If I think about what in the system was overlooked, I don't know that it was a systemic problem. I think it was, at least, and I'm critical of myself, it was, as I said earlier, I rationalized that I'm not going to change this anyway. So, what I did instead was, I'll be in the classroom as much as possible so that I'm observing more, and the students will see me, and that will help people feel better if I'm there. And, I'll try to make it, better. And so I don't know if it was a systemic issue as much as me in a new leadership role, not stepping up when I should have stepped up, which is not usually something that I do, but I really believed I wasn't, I think that the issue was I believed I couldn't make a difference at that point, and I should have tried.
What did you learn about relationships?
In moving forward and maybe dealing with other issues and then taking that new experience and reflecting back, is learning that the kind thing to do is to be clear to people. It is not fair to withhold information that might help a person to be better, be more effective at their role, because it's difficult to have the conversation or because you don't want to. And again, moving forward and then reflecting, is it really doesn't hurt your relationship. If you approach those, what we call, crucial conversations or difficult conversations, with a sense that you want to provide dignity for the person, you want to speak truth, not opinions, but truth. You want to be clear and direct. Direct is clear. And you want to deliver the information in a kind manner. My experience since has been that really doesn't harm your relationship. It may hurt for a little bit, but it really doesn't ruin relationships. And in many ways, it promotes better relationships. It promotes trust. It promotes accountability. And I think for everyone else in the organization, even though they may not know details, you can sense in an organization when that accountability piece is there, and you're truthful, but you treat people with dignity, but you also speak honestly about where problems might exist.
Yeah, that is, you use that word dignity and clarity, or to be really clear with individuals, being of the utmost importance. As superintendents, we often will, not many people are calling us to say you're doing a bang up job. They want us to know about the issues in their lives, and they will approach your board, and they will approach you, and they want action, and they don't always have good, clear reasons. It's just a perception or something like that. And I have spoken to superintendents in the past, and I would probably fall in that category if I were doing real soul searching, of moving in a direction to talk to someone about whether or not this was a good fit and things like that, based not on the most clear information. And so when you said clear, it really resonated with me about being completely transparent and honest about what's working and what's not working, and having clear examples. And it sounds like as you moved forward, when I asked, what did you learn about relationships, that was an important piece, that there was going to be increased clarity moving forward for those you were going to have, as you said, crucial or difficult conversations.
Yeah, I think that goes back again to truly living your values. If we're going to live our values, and even though we have 4 values here that might be different than somebody else's, anything that's, if you're truly living your values, that's what you have to do. And it has to start with the leader at the top. If I, as the superintendent and CEO, don't live and demonstrate and model the values, including when I have to have a difficult conversation, then I really can't ask anyone else to do it. When I was a building principal, I used to say to my staff, don't ask things of children that we don't expect of ourselves as adults. But it's the same, if you're going to have a mission statement, if you're going to have values, if you're going to have a strategic plan, you have to model it. And so I said, one of our here values is accountability. And so if I don't hold other people accountable, if I don't hold myself accountable to holding other people accountable, then really I can't ask that of anyone else. And so, but I think, again, you ask about relationships. I really don't think it hurts relationships. You will always have that person who's going to be upset at you. Lencioni has another podcast. It's Leaders Can't Be Pleasers. And, again, I work for students first and adults second. So these are the things you have to do. And I can just say too, from my experience, I've had people actually, when I've had to have these difficult conversations, thank me for being upfront. Like, thank you for telling me I did not realize, or thank you for recognizing that I'm not happy in this role and I really do want to do something different. If you do, I think, again, if you dignity, kindness, truth, and clarity, you'll get through it. It will be okay. And really, the goal is not to punish someone or criticize. The goal is to help them to be either in a different role or to be more effective in the role that they're in. You're trying to grow the person. I think the big shift from going from being a classroom teacher to being a leader is now I'm trying to develop adults and I want them to be successful.
Yeah, you're living that value of relationships, which is one of your four, right?
Mm-hmm,
As opposed
absolutely.
to, you can tell when a teacher's in a hallway sort of dragging a kid, not literally dragging, but the kid's just like on the ground and
Yeah.
arms up and they're saying, I care about you. I care about you. You made a decision. This doesn't define you. And the kid's just like, ugh. The kid knows that teacher's like, I am so sick of you. It's really what they're saying in there. I care about you. I care about you.
Right.
So yeah, really, really meaning what you say. So what frustrated you?
In that situation,
Yeah.
I think I was more frustrated. I became frustrated with myself. And then as the year went on, I just was wanting the year to end. And I was, frustrated that I felt ineffective in moving that situation along. And to be honest, frustrated that I didn't have someone to go to help me in that role. I was, I felt like I sort of felt like I was on my own, and I may have done that to myself as well. I may very well have had someone I could have asked for help, but I felt that I didn't. And you asked earlier about, is there systemic? I think the systemic look, once someone's retiring, once sometimes like, don't rock the boat, let's just make it to the end. That probably was some systemic, but I guess I'm more likely to blame myself for it.
Well, you mentioned the fact that, and I think many of us feel this way in leadership, it's a lonely job when we're doing these jobs
Yeah.
and we don't always have someone to reach out to. And some of that is that we bring it upon ourselves and that this is my job, I've got to do it. And sometimes it's the system that doesn't put in positions of support so that nobody has to feel as if they are doing this alone. And so that's an
Right.
interesting observation about the system.
Yeah. And that was early in my, like I said, early in my leadership career. So, again, I said, this is a little bit like parenting, you learn, you make the oldest child always gets all the mistakes, and so each
Yes, we put more
successive
money in our oldest kid's HSA for therapy than the other two.
exactly. I think, but each successive year and each successive position, if you move to new positions, you learn, and the goal is to get better.
So that's a nice transition into, so in the end, what was something that was good that came out of that situation?
I think it was me having the realization that it doesn't matter if someone's retiring. It doesn't matter if someone has announced they're resigning, that if something is happening in a classroom that is not promoting the best learning environment for students, those students are counting on me to be the one to speak up on their behalf. They don't have the ability to do that. And so that's my job. And so I've never shied away from those kinds of conversations since that time. And that's not to say that there aren't times when you say, okay, are we going to really get anywhere? But if something is causing a bad situation or a less than ideal learning environment for students, I will deal with. I will have the conversation. I've never since then. I think the feeling that I had about it just made it that I wouldn't do that again.
In the end, this podcast is really designed to help aspiring and early in their career and even established leaders learn from the experience of other leaders. And so with that in mind, what advice would you give to an aspiring leader?
So we've talked quite a bit about values. And again, through my reflecting on my own experience in education, my advice would be that you should choose to work in an organization whose values align to your own. Whether they're the stated values or you can somehow ascertain when your personal professional values don't align in school districts. It could be in a community or, in that, whatever the organization is, it's going to be difficult to lead people because it will feel inauthentic, or at least has been my experience. It feels inauthentic if it's not aligned. And that doesn't mean everything has to be perfect, but yeah, be choosy. And right now, educational leaders can be a little bit, but really be true to your own values and look to work in places. Even if there's a lot of work to do, you can still look to work in places where you're going to align from a value standpoint. And I think that's really important.
We will end there. My guest again today was Dr. Kim Pietsch-Miller. And Kim, thank you so much for using the power of language to help leaders across the nation continue to learn and grow. Thank you for the first time I've heard the word pivot in a while that didn't make me cringe, because throughout the entire pandemic, we were pivoting. And I said, no one can use that word ever again. And I heard it today and I thought, that wasn't so bad. So thank you. But truly, thank you for joining me today. I've learned so much from you and I can't wait to launch this episode.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed talking with you as well.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created the Daruma doll butterfly artwork. Imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It is a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. And I'm proud to be an imperfect leader, so I hope you'll join me next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action.